My name is John Forts, and I am a person in long-term recovery.
I'm Nan Garland, and I'm a woman in long-term recovery.
And my name is Jerry Randall. I'm a person in long-term recovery.
My name is Vicki, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. For me, that means that I haven't used heroin or abused any prescription medication in over 10 years.
For me, that means making a conscious decision every day to do something to maintain my recovery and improve my quality of life.
Showing up for myself each day in my recovery, and with that, I get the gift of giving back to others.
For me, what this means is that I'm able to be a productive member in society. I'm able to be a program director of a treatment program with High Point Treatment Center. I'm able to be a husband to my wife, a son to my parents, a brother to my siblings, and a father to my kids.
Opioids are something that comes from the poppy plants.
A painkiller used medicinally for chronic pain or, surgical pain.
Some used for illicit substance.
And they're often highly addictive, which could lead to overdose and death.
I would say the risk associated with opioids primarily are overdoses, hospital stays.
Long-term addiction, physical addiction, affects mentally addicted. So there's a obsession starts and compulsion to need more.
Opioids have impacted my life immensely.
So when I was 19 years old, I had to have surgery on my knee. And after that surgery, I was prescribed opioids to treat the pain. At that point, I didn't understand the risks of using those opioids. And although I used them as prescribed, I did become addicted.
And I didn't know how to stop. I lost everything. My business, my home, the respect of my children and friends. And I became isolated and withdrawn.
I've seen it take my life down to homelessness and living on the streets in New Bedford, as well as destroying some of my family members' lives as well.
So obviously we know there's a big stigma associated with opioids. I think what a lot of people don't take into consideration is that it starts with a need and a choice, right? Like a need to alleviate pain, whether that's emotional or physical, right? And choose to take something to get this relief, but no one chooses for this disease of addiction to take place.
Years ago, when my mother learned that I had a substance use problem, it wasn't let's go get him help and reaching out. It was actually try to be kept inside in the family of like 5 people, really in the way of how can we deal with it. And I think there's a shame, condescending added to that, and that's why.
I know of lawyers, doctors, nurses who are addicted. They're in the fellowships with me, and so nobody is exempt from addiction.
So oftentimes when I tell my story to people currently, they're surprised to hear that, I grew up in a beautiful home with, both of my parents and my siblings, and I got really good grades in school and played sports, and I had, goals and dreams, and substance use wasn't one of them. I think oftentimes we see people in this negative light, like they were raised in those environments, and that it's generational, and that people don't want more for themselves, but don't realize that this is something that can impact everyone, regardless of where you grew up, and it happens, in all of our communities.
I've seen a lot of changes in how society views opioids over the last few years even. It used to be seen as low risk, non-addictive, things like that. To see we come to know that they are very addictive, they are very risky medications, and I feel that being overprescribed years prior, that awareness has grown exponentially,
Has been a lot of education and a lot of prevention efforts regarding opiate use, where there's like fentanyl test strips for individuals that are going to use in the community to prevent overdose.
So doctors are prescribing less, people are doing their due diligence to try to seek alternative means instead of going directly to opioids for immediate relief because we're more aware of some of the risks involved.
But I think we have made positive strides to where we're at now in 2024 and regarding, the stigma, especially the campaign on stigma that they had, and where we really have gotten our voices heard and our voices as people in recovery. of whom we are, and that people can recover.
Something I wish I knew out the gate, that I wasn't impervious. This could happen to anyone. I thought that because I was being prescribed medications from a doctor because of a need, because of chronic pain issue, that it could not lead to long-term opioid dependence, let alone heroin use. So to have that conversation, some would say that regardless, of who you are, the situation you're in, you're not invincible to it, and it can happen to anyone.
If I had known more and been educated more as a teenager, I had suffered severe trauma by two men, and that's when I crossed that invisible line for self-medication. And that personality, I became defined by that.
For me, I think by not understanding the risks of substance use really did a lot of damage in my life. So I think as adults, what we need to be doing is really having open and honest conversations with our youth about opioids, about prescription medication, and the impact that they can have on our lives, and be able to have real conversations around that.
I would say if you're a teenager and you're experimenting or you have emotional problems or issues, please reach out and talk to someone. There is no shame in talking about how you feel.
The recovery community has supported me very much in my journey. It's really cool to be a part of a community that's working side by side to combat this opioid epidemic. Try to decrease the lives lost, the families destroyed as a direct result of opioid exposure and addiction.
I really owe everything to my recovery community. Those are the people that have helped me the most through the worst times in my life, and have really been there to support me in a non-judgmental way.
It was the recovery community that took me under their wing and showed me what I was up against and how to overcome it and how to maintain my recovery. And for these folks and those to come, I'll be forever grateful.
I just celebrated January 5th, my 6th anniversary, and received a couple of medallions, one from AA, one from NA. I'm part of both fellowships. And I see a lot of these young women and men, they're now in the recovery field. A few of those young women are now, have their LADAC, licensed addiction counselor degrees. They work in the recovery community, and it's beautiful. It's just beautiful to see these transformations,
What motivated me to ask for help is kind of there's a few parts to that. My last overdose, God willing, I woke up to my 4-year-old niece in tears. She's the one that found me overdosed, and seeing that look on her face, my sister's face, I never wanted anyone to experience that again as a direct result of my using.
So I didn't necessarily want to enter treatment when I did, but as I was able to become more clear-minded, it was definitely my son that gave me the motivation to continue to progress in my recovery.
So in 1995, it was actually my mother and my father, and I love this question. I went to the window. I would sneak in the house every Sunday night after doing a run, we'll say. But this time, my parents in the old school Cape Verdean, they looked at me, they opened up the window and they looked down and they said, son, you can't come home no more. And that was in 1995. So that tough love started my recovery process.
My sister had found my drugs, and my sister worked for the Brockton Police Department in dispatch, and she confronted me, and the gig was up. My family didn't know that I was addicted to heroin then. And, I told her I would tell the truth. And I remember that night screaming at her, you don't understand, I need that, give it back. I was insane. She said she'd never been so frightened of her sister before in her life, and she gave it back. I said, I'll tell you everything, just give it back, and I'll get help. And she ended up coming into my apartment after I had overdosed January 4th of 2018, and I just knew that was it. I was scared. It was different that time, and she brought me through the police department to a program that they were in conjunction with, and I went off to detox, and I had surrendered. And I knew it was time. As far as my son, he and I were very, very, very close. We were the best of friends. He was one of those guys that he called his ma every day, and I love you, Ma. One of those, we were that tight. You know, he shared with me the pain he had because his father wasn't in his life. And he relapsed and he passed away from a fentanyl poisoning 10 months ago. And our life has forever changed.
The biggest thing I've gained back as a direct result of my recovery is my moral compass, my spiritual values, to be able to move with purpose, move with pure motives, move without malice intent. I think that's the biggest change.
In recovery, I have been able to gain back everything that I lost during my active use and then some. So things that are really important to me are, gaining back the relationship and the trust of not only my son, but my entire family.
I would say two things that I've earned back since I've been in my recovery. And one of those is that my relationship with myself. For years, I didn't have a relationship with myself. So 2006, I'm here in the Salvation Army in Brockton, and I still don't even know who I am, at that time. And it wasn't to doing some work on myself. I was able to realize actually who I am, and I come to find out I'm actually not a bad person, right? And I just had a substance use disorder that needed to be addressed. And then another thing is I was able to re-strengthen the relationships with my family members. Actually that took time, folks. So it does take a while because of the trust factor. But my relationship today with my family members are just amazing. I live 3 streets away from my parents. My sisters are at my house all the time. My younger brother, Paul. We just all have nice, great conversations and relationships. So I would say that would be probably the 2 primary things. A relationship with myself and better relationships with family members.
It's an incredible network we have here locally. Yeah, it's given me my life back. I have the love and support of my family back. I'm respected in the community. I don't know, there is life after addiction, definitely.